Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Monday. Welcome to the show. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we tend to piss off the right and the left. Our only agenda is the truth here on the show. And we've got a lot of truth bombs to lay on you today because President Biden is out. But just moments ago, breaking news from the White House, a secret meeting. Could the president be on his way to fully resigning the presidency? An unbelievable past 24 hours with the president resigning, a coup basically within the Democratic Party. We're going to talk about all angles of this in a few minutes.
And we're not going to say I told you so, but I'll give this one to Clayton again. You did.
Yeah.
You said it. Yes, all along. So it's shocking, nevertheless.
I love when we did a whole deep dive on this months ago, and I outlined how this was going to happen, and people in the chat were like, comments were like, conspiracy theorists laughing. Well, okay.
All right. We're also going to talk about the latest in the Trump assassination. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I just mentioned in my video yesterday that you even said Sunday, and then I was like, trust redacted. You said Sunday this would happen.
There we go. Also, the Trump assassination, the investigation continues to unfold, but it's not really an investigation from any official sources because the government totally lacks curiosity on what happened there. Were there multiple shooters? What was the motivation of the shooter? They don't seem to care. Congress cares and people online care. So we're going to talk about what we know, who we can trust as that continues to unfold. Also, Benjamin Netanyahu set to address Congress this week. I feel like it's not a good time. Anybody else feel like this? We're a little busy.
No, because he's the real president of the United States, so he has to fly in and check on his children right now.
That's what it feels like. Yes. But at the same time, for the rest of us, we're like, look, both parties are having very important elections right now. We're a little busy, but we have time for Zelensky. We have time for Netanyahu. So we're going to take a look at that. Yeah. We got a lot of news to get to on this Monday. So good to see all of you guys. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. You can let us know here. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Rumble. We are live on X. So good to see all of you guys. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend with your families. We've got a lot of news to get to here, so let's dive into it. What we saw this weekend can only be described as an American coup within the Democratic Party led by President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And moments ago, we learned from multiple sources from Biden's chief of staff that called an emergency meeting at the White House this morning. So the question we're asking, will the president step down as president? We already know he's not running, but will he step down? Here is the moment. Here's the report just a few moments ago. Reports are calling Biden's, this is an FAA flight restriction that just went up in Wilmington, according to Laura Loomer in Delaware, where Joe Biden lives. The flight restriction is for VIP movement. This coincides with presidential movement. Joe Biden's health is declining rapidly. And as I reported yesterday, he is now in the terminal stage of his illness. Today, Joe Biden's chief of staff held an emergency meeting with all White House staff. And I've separately heard that report as well. Reports are calling Biden's condition a terminal stage. So we could see, perhaps in a matter of days, President Biden stepping down from the presidency of the United States, handing over the presidency to Kamala Harris. Of course, you guys, this is the strategy, right? This is to give her some kudos before the actual election. It is also the exact plotline of Veep. That's how she won the presidency, is becoming the incumbent just before the election. It's truth is stranger than fiction. I very much would like answers from the White House. For instance, Karine Jean-Pierre, who's been telling us for months and months that he's totally fine and vigorous.
Oh, yeah.
And then
all
of a sudden the story is different.
Yeah.
Why have you been saying this all along if the truth now comes out? That's interesting, in addition to the coup angle, which I think is more interesting.
Yeah, and we'll get to it in a second, but President Trump calling for an investigation into the doctors who essentially lied to us, the White House doctors. We'll get there in a second. So Democrats love to lecture other countries about their elections, calling for free and fair elections. What Democrats did this weekend by pushing out Joe Biden was anything but free and fair. It was a banana republic move, quite honestly. It was an elite coup of the American election process. Remember what Joe Biden, by the way, told us 9 days ago.
What's Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? Here's my answer. I am running and we're going to win. I'm not going to change that.
So apparently he's furious this morning at this swindle that's been handed. This, to me, it reminds me of, because we'll get into some of the signature stuff and the letterhead and all of that in just a second here. But what it reminds me of is, you know how they put in some of those elder care laws, like in California, like you can't take advantage of the elderly, like you can't go to a nursing home and have them sign over the rights to their house. Yes. Right? That's what this sounds like to me. That they literally pulled a coup within the White House, within his staff members, where they pulled some sort of like an elderly crime by duping him. Right. I mean, that's exactly what it's shaping up to be. So delegates are once again being circumvented, much as they were in 1968. The Democratic elite have basically seized control, pushing aside the electoral voice. The primary voters chose Joe Biden. Now, say what you want about Joe Biden. You don't have to like it. I certainly would never vote for Biden, the pedophile. Even if you put a gun to my head, I wouldn't vote for him. But Democrats voted for Biden in the primaries, and he won their primaries. As a reminder, this is how the local ABC affiliate in Iowa called the race. Even their segment is called "Your Voice, Your Vote."
Iowa Democrats have released the results of their 2024 caucus. Now, incumbent Joe Biden has received over 11,000 votes.
Tonight, President Biden campaigning in California, taking a few moments to thank his supporters after he easily won the South Carolina Democratic presidential primary.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. 2020 and now again 2024. Now let's go win the whole thing. Let's win it all.
Well, you could make the point, though, they didn't actually run a fair race because Robert F. Kennedy decided he had to even get off the Democratic ticket because he wasn't getting a fair chance in the race. So they sort of steamrolled opposition candidates. So the Democrats may have had a chance to choose somebody else for themselves, but instead the choice was taken from them. They were pushed into the funnel of voting for Joe Biden, only to have that vote removed from them. So, I would feel very cheated had I voted in the Democratic primary.
True. I mean, it is a joke, right? They push out third-party candidates. Of course, they make sure that the only people they want on the ballot are there in the first place, like we saw that with Bernie Sanders in 2016.
Absolutely. Bernie Sanders is a great example of how the donor class decided that the will of the people, because we saw Bernie Sanders selling out auditoriums to the tune of Donald Trump's rallies in 2016, but the donor class and the media decided to edge him out. So Democrats didn't actually get a say in order to promote Bernie Sanders. The question is why, when we look at how Bernie Sanders' agenda has morphed over the last 8 years, that might give us a clue. But again, Democratic voters never had a say. It was the kingmakers and the donor class.
Christine Huff in our chat says Biden was installed. And yeah, I think we can clearly see that he's being uninstalled right now, like a bad software program. So I love that it was called Your Voice, Your Vote. That was how they labeled that in Iowa. What a joke. Biden secured the votes to be the party's nominee. But this weekend, President Joe Biden announced his resignation from the presidential race in a letter that he posted on X. Here is that letter. Notice anything odd about this letter? Did he even write this letter? We'll come back to that in a second with more details.
Can I answer? There's no presidential seal on it. Are you really asking or no?
I'm going to come back to it. But yeah, just keep an eye. Just take a look.
It's not a quiz.
That signature suspect too to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, did he write it? Did he sign it? We'll come back to that in a second, but just put that in your pipe and smoke it a second. So this move, though thoroughly shocking, and it's shockingly similar to a dark chapter from our nation's past, the Democratic primary of 1968, a number of years before I was born, but it's history, and fascinating history that we should all study, when the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, of course, the Attorney General at the time, who was Democratic nominee, was leading the Democratic primary of 1968, when the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy led to a chaotic, then undemocratic selection process, of course, at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which, by the way, we're about to head back to Chicago for the DNC. It seems appropriate, right? History repeating itself. So when Chicago Mayor Richard Daley at the time essentially installed Hubert Humphrey as the nominee, even though he didn't win any primaries, and voters didn't vote for him. It doesn't matter, right? For Democrats, it doesn't really matter. But of course, Hubert Humphrey was a pro-war candidate, of course. So a warmonger intent on continuing the Vietnam War. The people didn't want Humphrey at all, but the warmongering Democratic elites did. Sound familiar? Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Bob, does today's news affect your campaign moving forward?
Well, I think everything affects my campaign. I can't tell you how, and I try not to make predictions because I try not to do spin. But I think, as any of you can see, that we're living in a very, very dynamic situation now. It's unprecedented in American history. In fact, the closest thing to this, when I look back on American history, is the 1968 primaries where my father participated and was killed. And ironically, the convention, the Democratic convention this year is being held once again in Chicago. And in 1968, the Democratic Party tried to fix that convention with Mayor Daley basically anointing Hubert Humphrey, who was the DNC's choice, and there was chaos that erupted, and it destroyed the Democratic Party for a decade. So I think we have a lot to learn from that history. As I think Mark Twain said, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and it's really rhyming right now.
So he accused the Democratic Party of rigging the nomination process by endorsing Kamala Harris, he went on to say, whom he described as monumentally unpopular. That's absolutely the case. Remember, she won 0 delegates when she ran. 0. None. He argued that this decision is the easiest way to secure the campaign war chest, all of that money, without actually engaging in a fair and open democratic process. Makes sense, right? Because by opening it up to delegates, then all of that money that President Biden made campaigning, remember George Clooney, $30 million, millions of dollars here, millions of dollars there. That massive amount of DNC money will be divided up and then split among all of these different candidates. So it's not just going to go to Kamala Harris. And therefore, they absolutely will not beat President Trump if you're dividing up that war chest. And then Kennedy called on Democrats to use what he calls neutral polling to choose a candidate in order to better learn who has the best chance of actually defeating Trump. So, DNC chair Jamie.
But even that seems like a gamification of the system, because they're so focused on beating Trump that they're not focused on what they actually want. Who is the person that speaks to our values as a Democratic person? That's not even the question. The question is just, how do we beat Trump? And so you can see that they lack ideas, and their only ideas are funding foreign wars and the culture wars around gender, race, and all of that nonsense.
They don't care. They don't care at all.
Just looking at, going back to like the Bernie Sanders thing, that was when they told the voters, we actually don't care what you think in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Like for me, that was when they're like, we don't care what you want. Like, you're getting what we want you to have. You will eat what I made for dinner, and that's just how it is.
Right. Yeah. Democratic voters actually wanted Bernie Sanders, and no, sorry, you can't have that. You absolutely can't have that. And by the way, the media was in collusion with the Democrats, the DNC. MSNBC famously wouldn't even put Bernie Sanders on the screen in their graphics. And they had a producer from MSNBC who was a whistleblower and quit in protest, and talked about how MSNBC wouldn't even put Bernie Sanders on this television screen, which is really remarkable. So DNC Chair Jamie Harrison said in a statement today that the party will take a transparent and orderly process to move forward, to choose the nominee, which could mean anything. I'm sure, though, it'll be really transparent, right? Democrats are all about transparency. Republicans say they will sue the Democrats if that money is then handed over to Kamala Harris. Biden, of course, raised that money, not Kamala Harris. But something bigger is going on here.
But wait, can we just think about a lawsuit like that? Because a lawsuit to that magnitude could then lead to discovery as to who actually wrote that resignation letter. Who was involved in it, right? I want to see a digital signature. I want to see some indication that the president actually did it from his own devices or IP address, or some communication that he's on board with this, and it was not the Kamala Harris campaign or the donor class or whoever the puppet master is. So I'm all for litigation. I can't believe
I would love to see that.
But yes, let's do that.
To that point. So to that point, though, like the thing is, if they do sue, it's the whole idea that it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission. It'll already be spent by the time it actually hits the courts. Like, it'd have to hit the courts in record speed. Otherwise, it's already spent. And then what? They're like, oh, sorry, we'll pay it back.
Unless there's an injunction. They can sue and ask for an immediate injunction.
So none of this money gets
and
spent.
say, this is on hold. You can't touch this until you win it in a court of law. So we have systems in place for that. Let's use it. I want to see that.
But something bigger is going on here than all of this. We need to acknowledge the elephant in the room, Barack Obama. So where is Barack Obama in all of this? Well, he's running the whole plan. And he's not endorsed Kamala Harris as of this morning. He's notably absent from throwing his support behind Kamala Harris. Barack Obama's silence is absolutely deafening right now. But I'll ask you guys this question. You guys remember Rod Blagojevich, better known as Blago?
Oh, yeah.
Blago. Man, I remember interviewing him back in the day. That was crazy. You know, the former governor of Illinois, of course, went away for all sorts of fraud and was locked up for a number of years.
For selling Obama's seat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So here he is tweeting this morning. I've known Obama since 1995. We both came out of Chicago politics. I know how it works. He's behind the campaign to dump 15 million Democratic primary voters and replace Biden with his choice. Classic Chicago Democrat machine politics, selection over election, the bosses over the people. But it's not just Obama. Pelosi, Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries, no endorsement of Kamala Harris this morning. Over the past few days, there have been reports of donors and strategists meeting with Michelle Obama, further fueling speculation about the Obamas' involvement here and their real intentions in all of this. Michelle's house has seen a steady stream of donors, policy advisors coming and going, strategists going back and forth, back and forth. Why? Why? Sources say that Kamala will only be used really as a stopgap measure before Michelle Obama takes some sort of control and the nomination at the DNC. Really? Or will it be Hillary Clinton? Either way, it looks like Kamala Harris is meant to be sort of the scapegoat thrown under the bus candidate for a short amount of time. So these gatherings at her house, this is informed speculation, gains weight when you consider Barack Obama's conspicuous absence from Kamala's side during this critical juncture. Adding another layer to all of this political drama, you have seasoned political strategist Roger Stone, who's been right multiple times on his predictions, both about the assassination and what was going to happen with President Biden. According to his sources, he's warned that Hillary Clinton's potential maneuvers are undermining Kamala Harris. He says Kamala is effed. If polls show her losing to Trump by August 1st, Obama will push her aside for Michelle Obama, who will only reluctantly agree to keep her husband and his entire criminal cabal out of jail.
But this reluctancy is played very well to the cameras and has been for years. So in the run up to the 2012 election, when Michelle Obama was like, I don't know if we want to run again. I don't want to put my family through this.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of work. And then, okay, we're doing it, right? And then every time she's asked about politics or staying in politics, you get these, well, I don't want Secret Service. I want to ride with the windows down in the car. I want to be a private citizen, but okay, I'll release a book. It's very well played. And it comes off as, no, I really shouldn't, but okay, twist my arm.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also been all of these guys I'm sticking by Joe Biden. Like, he's the guy. Yeah. He's mentally fit. He's there. We just learned, just a short time ago, thanks, Pelosi just did endorse Kamala Harris with immense pride. She praises Biden's wisdom in selecting Harris. So, all right.
I mean, myself. So, I did a good job.
But this makes sense.
The wisdom in selecting the person that's just right there in front of you.
Right. It's brilliant.
Like the first person you see.
She was hiding in plain sight.
But this makes sense, right? Given what I'm about to talk about here, which is this move towards making her the president for the next couple of months, right? Allow her to become president. President Biden steps down, citing health concerns. So she's president now for a few months, really allows herself the opportunity to be elevated to run against President Trump. And that certainly helps solidify her candidacy in that regard. So, yeah, fascinating to see Pelosi coming out. So that still leaves Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. I'm sure Chuck Schumer probably, as we're speaking right now, is probably drafting some sort of a tweet or something that will endorse it. With
a weapon to his head, maybe. Maybe. This is the way that seems to be playing out.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating how all this is coming together. And so Roger Stone suggests that Clinton, ever the opportunist, might leverage this chaos to make her grand return to the stage. This possibly only adds more complexity to an already tumultuous situation within the Democratic Party. Listen.
Biden did this by releasing a letter, which he specifically said he would not be endorsing any candidate. And then literally 4 minutes later, he formally endorsed Kamala Harris. My sources tell me that Biden is furious at Barack Obama, who he clearly knows has orchestrated his ouster. He's equally angry at Bill Clinton because he thinks the Clintons said one thing to his face, but were colluding with Obama behind their back. The Obamas and the Clintons are not political allies.
So how does this election then unfold, of course, during for 2024, right? Make sure that people are not going to the polls to vote, allow mail-in ballots only, electronic voting, make sure that this is all lined up, get these polls now, because it was a massive landslide for President Trump over President Biden. Now this is a much more condensed space right now, of course, and a much more condensed much more condensed differential between these two candidates if Kamala Harris is elevated and praised by the DNC. And then, of course, they'll keep us home locked up during a November election. So we use electronic voting. So how did this happen? 1 minute he's forced out, releases a letter saying he won't endorse anyone, does President Biden. And then 4 minutes later, he endorses Kamala Harris. Like, how does that exactly happen here? So here's the letter. A lot of eagle-eyed observers are pointing this out, right? This letter looks really interesting. Look at the signature and notice that it was not written on official White House letterhead, which is why would that be the case? Why would that be the case?
Looks like it looks like it says /R Bendis. Like that doesn't even look like
R. And he never underlines his signature. I mean, it looks like he didn't write this at all. He certainly didn't sign the letter. And you believe? I mean, look at his signature compared. So here's his signature in red. You can see on your screen. This is his signature in red that he signed this letter with. These are all of his executive orders over the past few weeks. March, June, just a few weeks ago in June, and July, just a few days ago.
To Blave. You know what that's from? Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it looks like.
To bluff. Everyone knows means to bluff.
Right.
To bluff.
Right? That's what it looks like. To Blave.
And
it doesn't look like his signature at all.
That's it. Like you can clearly see it says Biden Jr. But like, where's the junior in that signature? It looks like it's all run together. It's not separated like every other signature.
Okay. Notable.
Yeah. So this is fascinating from Loomer. I'll just put this up here. Do you notice the Biden dropout letter isn't on official letterhead, she writes. I'm told by a source that Joe Biden didn't even write this letter. Source tells me Steve Ricchetti, the counsel to Joe Biden, actually wrote the letter. Biden senior advisor and campaign chair Mike Donnellan was present as a witness while Ricchetti wrote the letter because Biden is too cognitively damaged to write a letter or comprehend what's going on. This means the signature is likely forged on the letter as well. Notice it's not on official campaign or presidential letterhead. This means it's not legitimate. I think it's clear he didn't write the letter. I think everyone watching knows that he hasn't written a tweet in years. He's not writing that letter. Are you kidding me? Just the other day when he was slamming President Trump's speech at the RNC, no one for a second thought that he was writing those threads on Twitter. It was his staff. Of course he's not writing these things. No one believes that.
And like I said last week, it seems like the media was already trying to say he was going to be out, but then he put out a statement just last week saying, I'm not leaving. I'm going to be out on the campaign trail next week. And then this letter comes out. And so it just seems kind of like, yeah, they're like trying to get ahead of this. And now what can he say? He can't say, I didn't write that. So, it feels like you said, this feels like a coup.
Yeah. I mean, if he says I didn't write that, then they're going to pull the plug on this guy. So it seems incredibly dangerous right now. It's not funny. There's no schadenfreude here in saying that we told you so.
No. Well, here's the stark reality. The Democratic Party is not only undermining Biden's tenure, but eroding really the very principle of democracy. The elites in the party are actually dictating the terms of this right now, ignoring the electorate's voice, even if it is shady, and they pushed out other candidates during the primaries, promoting a candidate with zero popularity. The people don't want Kamala Harris at all. And they're elevating this individual without having going through any primary process or anything. All of this is being done to maintain control, and it's an orchestrated power grab. What about the White House doctors that told all of us a few weeks ago that Biden is even better than you? I mean, he's more fit than you are, right? He's mentally fit and he's ready to serve. He's smarter than you, President Biden is. President Trump said yesterday those doctors should be investigated. And if he's not fit to serve, J.D. Vance thinks that we need to use the 25th Amendment to remove him from office.
You'd investigate the people that hid Joe Biden's condition?
Well, I think somebody has to look at it. Look,
you had people that lied to the American public. And I tell you what, you ought to take a look at his doctors, because his doctors keep giving him this wonderful report. I'm not a doctor, but I saw him the other day, was unable to get up the children's stairs going into Air Force One.
Is it a coup against Joe Biden?
Sort of, yeah.
I think it is. I mean, look, there's a constitutional process, the 25th Amendment. If Joe Biden can't run for president, he can't serve as president. And if they want to take him down because he's mentally incapable of serving, invoke the 25th Amendment. You don't get to sort of do this in the most politically beneficial way for Democrats. If it's an actual problem, they should take care of it in the appropriate way.
25th Amendment. It's a great point.
He makes a point. Stop being so reasonable, J.D. Vance.
So Democrats can no longer lecture us about democracy. They can no longer lecture other countries about free and fair elections. Remember when Democrats, the Biden administration, slammed the vote for the Donbass region of Ukraine that voted overwhelmingly to become part of Russia? They were tired of being genocided. They didn't want to be killed anymore by Ukrainian neo-Nazis. They wanted to become part of Russia. And the Biden administration and Kamala Harris specifically slammed it. It's not a free and fair election. It's Putin's tyranny. He's an oligarch. He's an authoritarian. That's not a free and fair election. And then, of course, when you interviewed people from that region, they said, oh, yeah, we absolutely voted.
Same story, Crimea, but that was Obama's lie.
Yeah.
We can't let it slide, though.
So the ruling class is showing its hand, wielding power without any true authority here. The Democratic Party, by basically engineering this coup, has shown its true colors. And the essence of democracy is the voice of the people, right? You vote for when people speak, you carry out those wishes. But this appears for Democrats Clayton. That people aren't important at all. I mean, you vote for individuals because platform that you want, and the people should carry that out, and they're not, and it's really, really troubling. So we'll be watching this very closely. We've got more news to get to here on your Monday. We're going to talk about the Trump assassination and unbelievable new details about that. And moments ago, the Secret Service head, Director Cheadle, being grilled in front of Congress. We're going to show you some amazing moments from that. So don't go anywhere. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Black Forest Supplements, because right now we're going to discuss a topic that's really been bothering us here on the show for a while: the relentless attack on masculinity, the feminization of men. This is a problem we can't ignore. The truth is, weak and feminized men are more easily controlled. Just look at the Biden administration, making society vulnerable to the manipulation and tyranny. This is why anyone who speaks out against it is quickly labeled a homophobe, a sexist, or a misogynist, and they're shut down. They really do not want you to have strong men. And look, we're bombarded with estrogenic chemicals from plastics, junk foods, sedentary lifestyles, processed food, seed oils, all making us more feminine. The mainstream media loves to demonize normal heterosexual masculine men, calling them toxic. So that's why our friends over at Black Forest Supplements realize this, and they've seen a 17% drop among 60-year-olds in 2004 to 1980, from 2004 compared to 1987 in testosterone levels. And guess what? Right now, they have come up with their Black Forest Turkestrone with Tonkat Ali limited edition supplement that's been dubbed the feminization killer, since it combines two of the most potent natural testosterone boosters in the market. Turkesterone is a natural anabolic compound that supports muscle growth, improves endurance, and boosts testosterone levels. And now, Tonkat Ali is an ancient potential herb that has been used for thousands of years to increase testosterone levels, improve libido, and reduce stress levels. So guys, right now, you can buy two, get one free by going to blackforestsupplements.com/redacted. You can buy two, get one free by going to blackforestsupplements.com/redacted. We love the team over at Black Forest Supplements. We don't promote many people, but I genuinely respect these guys. Black Forest Supplements is a brand dedicated to bringing traditional masculinity and femininity back, fighting hard to bring back what's been lost. blackforestsupplements.com/redacted. Grover is crazy about what's going on today in the news. That's our dog.
Can you hear barking in the background? That's the dog.
Yes, that is the dog. That's not a cat. That is a dog.
I feel like barking out of this. I say that I slept restless over this news of the Democratic coup, this idea of Kamala Harris, this idea of, it just feels like a dark future to me. So, we didn't, you noticed in the last segment actually take on Kamala Harris as a candidate, because there is time for that. But I feel like it's dystopic.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we've slammed her enough over the past couple of years here on this show.
I don't think so. I don't think that's the case, because I see friends on my social media feed excited about her race and gender, missing the fact that she is a warmonger. And that, I think, is what's like, what? You're already excited about this? You're not upset that your candidate of choosing was taken out of power in this way? So, okay, yeah, we'll get to that. There's time. There's time for us to.
But your friend wasn't watching the show. If your friend was watching our show, might have had a better, more educated understanding.
Clearly not, right? Yeah. No, but I mean, just watching these things in your, I just feel like, wait, we're there already. We're excited about this in the same way that maybe I felt duped by Hillary's gender and missing all the war that she had inflicted upon the world.
All right. Well, there's time to take her down. But the point is, I don't think she's going to be around for I'd be really surprised. And it's really interesting to see if these things happen where she's actually the candidate in the long term, or if she's really just a stopgap moment for that. Well, while all of the drama surrounding President Biden dropping out has sucked up the news headlines, Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States, there was an assassination, by the way, of a former president that has many more questions than answers this morning. And this weekend, we now have confirmation that there was more than one shooter. There was a conspiracy to assassinate the president of the United States. We don't need to wait for Congress to wrap up their investigation grilling Director Cheadle of the Secret Service. We already have independent verification of this, and from sources from the Secret Service and without, and eyewitnesses and audio forensics. So I don't give a rat's ass what Director Cheadle has to say. She's proven herself worthless. This weekend, we do have confirmation there was more than one shooter. There was a conspiracy to assassinate the president of the United States, and there was a mysterious man in a gray suit that no one can find for some reason. He's gone dark. What the hell is happening? Senator Ron Johnson told Maria Bartiromo that he has learned that right after Thomas Matthew Crooks was shot and killed, a guy in a gray suit just climbed up the ladder and on the roof where Crooks was dead, laying there dead, and started asking the local law enforcement to send photos of Crooks's body to him. Like, here's a cell phone number. I want you to send these photos to me right now. The man didn't identify himself. And it's very curious that he didn't have a cell phone on him, right? Who in this day and age goes to a Trump rally wearing a suit and you don't have a cell phone on you? So he couldn't take photos himself. He said, just take the photos and then send them to this phone number. Oh, that's curious. So you don't want us tracking cell phone data. I guess that's the point, right? We don't want to track you. So you're here by yourself without a cell phone on you. Very, very curious. Law enforcement then acquiesced. They sent photos. I've seen these photos. We're not going to show them to you. Crooks with a hole through his forehead. When the man was contacted, he said he was an ATF agent, but now he's gone totally dark. He's silent. We can't find him. Senator Ron Johnson explained these new details on Maria Bartiromo's show. Watch.
The local officers went up to that roof and started taking pictures of the dead body, of the shooter's body. So suddenly a guy in a gray suit walks up the ladder and goes up to the roof. And this guy in the gray suit, who didn't appear to have credentials, everybody assumed he was the Secret Service. So he tells one of the local law enforcement, send those pictures to this cell phone. And he gives him a number. And everybody assumed, well, that must be Secret Service. It turns out it wasn't Secret Service.
Some guy in a suit walks up the ladder. They believe you Secret Service. I'm not sure whether they gave credentials, but that's part of again, Maria, this is so preliminary. I'm issuing this. I'm providing this information, a much more detailed timeline to prompt others to come forward. We need to complete this picture. We have a lot of puzzle pieces to fill in here.
Is it odd to you that the locals were being told to send the pictures to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, ATF? Where does ATF come in?
The oddity starts with the fact that local law enforcement were just tasked with securing the perimeter, told to go cover that AGR building, not really told where to set up, so they set up on the second floor. They went to that AGR building at 10:30 in the morning. So they were stationed there well in advance. You know, they noticed this suspicious character at 5:10. They took a photo of him at 5:14. The president was shot at 6:11. You know, so again, an hour has passed. You know, again, they don't communicate. They didn't have communication, same channels with their law enforcement patrol officers. They weren't in communication with the Secret Service other than going through the Butler County communication center. So again, it's everything you would assume about Secret Service protection of a former president was not true. It didn't happen.
Oh, that's a senator. It's not some Yahoo.
Right.
You know?
Peddling conspiracies.
That's a senator of the United States. A highly respected senator, one of the few, by the way. Now, we reported last week, by the way, Frank Rizzo in our chat, Frank Rizzo, I love that, it says he was the Iran guy, I guess. Right, so that's the point, right? Like over the weekend, I pointed out how all of this talk now you're hearing, it's like, oh, it must have been Iran that was involved in this. Like he had, phones that were set, he had phones, encrypted phones, 3 of them or so that were set out and overseas encrypted phones and all of this stuff that I detailed this weekend. So I guess it is the Iran guy.
You know what
I think
I'm
it's just
waiting
the
for?
rebranding of
I was just going to say, I'm waiting for them to say, oh, because of this crowd, what was it called? Crowd fund or whatever the thing that happened with Microsoft, CrowdStrike. Like, oh, we lost all the data. We lost the recordings. We lost the, all this data we've gathered. Like, because it just seems coincidental that happened. Yeah. So I'm waiting for that to be the excuse that we can't be transparent because unfortunately we lost it all.
Yeah. Oh, we lost it all. All the data, like going back to 2015, all of our data has been wiped. So
wait, what was Philip going to say? I don't want to discourage.
Oh, it wasn't super important. I was going to comment that it could just be a rebranding of the Men in Black. They're now the Men in Gray. They're much more
I had that thought too.
They're
yes.
David Byrne oversized suits on a hot day. That's what they are. Now, we reported last week on our show that our sources were telling us that the shots were fired from multiple locations in the direction of the water tower. Now, we know that there were at least 2 shooters. That has been confirmed. There was a second shooter, according to nearly a dozen eyewitnesses, multiple audio forensics analysis, and now we're hearing from United States members of Congress that is the case. Chris Martinson, a PhD, posted this on X, a fascinating video. I'm not going to go through all of it here, but the narrative of Crooks being a lone gunman is 100% provably false, which means any deflection to investigating security lapses is evidence of a cover-up. The evidence I present today comes from analyzing and then comparing the audio files from 2 separate video recordings, one taken right in front of Trump, the other from just to the side of the American Glass building that Crooks was spotted on. As a reminder, audio forensics experts have already concluded that the audio signatures from 3 weapons could be resolved from whichever audio recordings they analyzed. Yes, the long-lost art form of audio forensics, which is highly valuable, which is how we were able to deduce multiple problems in the conspiracy against JFK. Here is Chris Martinson explaining at least a piece of this. Again, it's a 30-minute and deep dive analysis. I'm going to show you just a few key moments here of his analysis. Watch.
Here's just the first 3 shots from that video. I haven't done anything, no audio. I haven't done any enhancements. This is both of these video audio pieces are exactly pulled straight from the video itself. Here's 1, 2, and 3 to start. Okay, listen to that again. And one more time. Okay, now let's listen to the next string. Ooh. We just have an absolutely different sound between the first 3. There's no echo. It's much further away. It's more muffled. It's just not in the same place at all. But these next ones, very different sound. Totally different weapons. Okay.
Totally different weapons. Totally different location. And the echo is completely different because the echo reverberating off of buildings while the other is way far away. In our estimation, 488 yards away, which is not where Thomas Crooks was laying. So now here is the audio analysis or his discussion of this from the second video and how he says this is clearly 2 shooters.
And remember, we already have the analysis from audio experts elsewhere saying there's a difference between weapon A and weapon B. And I can show you that the rounds fired from weapon B were also aimed at the stage. Okay, so this is important. 2 weapons, one fires a string of 3, another fires a string of 5 or 6, depending on how we count, and off they go. And they were also out hitting the crowd and headed towards Trump. Okay? This is important because now we do not have a lone gunman anymore. Okay?
So, and very important to know that these were not like Secret Service snipers. These were being fired at the stage. The head of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, still has a job today, which is stunning. And today she spent the morning dodging questions on Capitol Hill in front of Congress, and it didn't go well. So here's some flavor of the day.
That is a no. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th? Yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest. Mr. Chairman.
Love Nancy Mace. And watch this stunning moment during questioning by Representative Fallon, and you can see if you can catch something. Pay very close attention to something that she says in response. I almost spit out my coffee when I heard it.
Director, do you have the ability personally, and do you have the authority to beef up security of any of your protectees?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So were you also aware there was a credible threat President Trump was facing? He was facing a heightened security threat to a foreign adversary?
Yes.
Okay. So given that there was an increased threat to President Trump's life, was he provided a full security complement akin to what a sitting U.S. president would receive?
He was provided a full complement of security based on the threat assessment that we had.
That's not my question.
And the venue.
My question is, if he'd been the sitting president, would he have had the same security he had on July 13th, or would have been beefed up?
There is a difference between the sitting president.
So your answer is he didn't.
And continuity of government and the responsibility that we have.
So he did not. Okay, there wasn't a CAT team, a full CAT team on site. There wasn't counter-surveillance teams on site. But this is the thing. You just said you had the ability to beef up the security. You knew about the threat, and you didn't. And that's as telling as it is chilling.
Did you catch what she said? Continuity of government? What? Why? Why? There's a difference between the sitting president and the continuity of government and the responsibility that we have, she said. Can you explain that? Continuity of government? Really? Okay, could you elaborate on that? I don't know that Fallon heard it, and I wish that other members of Congress would have heard it and really pushed her on that. What do you mean? Why is there a difference here in the continuity of government? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, okay, then let me see. What are the plans when Obama speaks in public? What are the plans when Bill Clinton speaks in public, or any of the Bushes, or anything like that? So, okay, that's easy to prove. Show us, like, okay, we have tiered Secret Service members and past presidents get the lower tier. Why? Yeah, okay, prove that then. Not just act confused that something, I have no answers for you.
Representative Andy Biggs was Mr. Crooks acting alone. She says, I'm going to have to refer you to the FBI once again. Watch.
Your agency has a no-fail mission, and on Saturday, July 13th, your agency spectacularly failed. The failure resulted in the death of Corey Comparator and serious injury to two other rally attendees, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, besides the injuries to President Trump. It is unfathomable that a 20-year-old on the radar of Secret Service and local law enforcement before President Trump went on stage was able to climb onto the roof of a building with a rifle and fire off multiple rounds before he was neutralized. Was Mr. Crooks acting alone?
Again, I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation.
Was he just a lone gunman?
I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation for motive.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Why would she dig her heels in and not say this was unacceptable? It won't happen again. The buck stops with me. Someone else can lead this better. Why?
Well, she did say the buck stopped with me like last week, but then she's been kept from speaking. And the only reason she's speaking is because she was subpoenaed.
Right.
So I don't know what's going on. What deep state Alejandro Mayorkas and part of the Biden administration doesn't want her to speak publicly? Well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. We can't stand her here on this show, but surprisingly, she asks one of the best questions during this hearing. Listen.
You established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event?
It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now, The individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building, there were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Okay.
Great
That's
question.
interesting.
From AOC.
And her answer, well, there's lots of weapons, you know. Could have thrown a stone.
So why
from
was the
there.
Pac-Man piece of it cut out? You just decided to...
It would have been just fine if they had a flamethrower, right? And we were thinking that maybe that was a possibility.
We have slingshots. People bring bow and arrow.
Right.
By the way, she also lied in front of Congress.
That's in bow and arrow range.
Yeah.
It is.
It's in Nerf gun range. She lied in front of Congress when she said that, backpacks are okay. She also talked about a rangefinder. Rangefinder is not suspect. She said backpacks not okay. And yet why did the Secret Service, as part of when they sent out an email to those arriving at this event, say backpacks are strictly prohibited? That's interesting.
Yeah.
So backpacks are strictly prohibited, and we showed those emails here on the show. But now you're saying that's not a problem? So
Did she not know that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
We've got more news to get to here on your Monday. We will dive deep into this. So, Will, let's take bets right now. Do you think President Biden will resign the presidency? Resign the presidency, not just drop out from the race, but resign the presidency and allow Kamala Harris to take over. I have sort of mixed sources on this. Some of my high-level sources saying, no, that's not going to happen. Other sources saying, yes, that is going to happen. So there seems to be quite a conflict on this, a debate. At the end of the day, really, there's only an inner circle of individuals who really know if this is going to happen. So who knows? Well, you want to take bets on it right now? I'm going to say that he does resign. I'm going to say that he does resign and steps aside before January and before the election and allows someone to step in. So I'm going to go against the green here.
You have to watch the dance they do, because if he's dropping out because of medical reasons, then that's a point that I agree with J.D. Vance on. Well, if that's the case, then or is it projected medical problems, or is it that he's currently undergoing them? Right. Because then, so you have to watch their dance, watch the words they use, listen to how they're framing it. Because if they're framing it in he's dropping out because he's medically unfit, then he would be medically unfit to be president. So it's just, watch what they say.
Not at the end of November. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Well, we've got more news to get to on the show. We're going to talk about Netanyahu flying in. Why is he meeting in front of Congress this week? I mean, timing, could you maybe reschedule things? Or is he really the president of the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu, flying in to check on his peeps in Congress, who are all answerable to him anyway? We'll talk about that in a moment. But first... Also,
we were going to talk about Ursula von der Leyen re-winning the election for the head of the European Commission. That's a big sigh, but we're going to invite Ralph Scholhammer on to talk about it, because he's one of my favorite European political analysts, and we will at least commiserate over the fact that this woman is in power and the people of Europe did not vote for her. Does that sound familiar? A woman being put in a position of power, but was not voted for by the people.
Right.
And it's a stretch, right?
Yeah,
Anybody?
I can't think of anybody
Can you put your
like
finger
that.
on it? But first, we're going to tell you about our friends over at American Financing because, of course, the economy is circling the drain, and it is stressful for American families. If you feel like you can't make ends meet for even just gas, groceries, your monthly expenses, and you're putting your expenses on a credit card, well, that's even more stressful, and you're in this never-ending financial cycle. But you can call American Financing because if you are a homeowner, they can help you leverage your assets to free up your income so that you can not only just live a little bit better, but maybe even create wealth for your family instead of living on the grind. So what they do is help you figure out what assets you have to leverage in order to lower your monthly expenses. And one asset you may have that you don't know is your home equity. They save their borrowers an average of $854 a month. That's like a $10,000 a year raise, and they can close in as little as 10 days. So if you start today, you might even get a month off your mortgage payment, which of course that would help you just create a little bit more breathing room. Or as my mom says, sometimes there's too much month at the end of the money. You can reverse that, right? So call them today, call American Financing, or go to americanfinancing.net/redacted, or you can call 866-890-8434 today. Once again, that's americanfinancing.net/redacted. Well, House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he will arrest any lawmakers who disrupt Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress, which happens this week on Wednesday. Why would an elected representative plus an American citizen not be able to exercise their right to oppose a foreign leader? Is it now? Not only have we seen on the internet, we're not allowed to criticize Israel, we're not allowed to not support the Zionist government. We now cannot, we have to sit there with our eyes trained on him and listen to what he says. That's funny, right? So here we have lawmakers making sure that Netanyahu can check in on his charges in American Congress, and lawmakers bending over backwards to bend the knee. Now, Johnson is specifically warning Democrats like AOC and Liz Warren, who said that they do not support Netanyahu's address to Congress. Here is AOC saying this in no uncertain terms in June after Netanyahu attacked the Biden administration, saying that, hey, you can't hold up our weapons. You have to support Israel or else. I'm telling you this. AOC said this man should not be addressing Congress. He's a war criminal, and he certainly has no regard for U.S. law, which is explicitly designed to prevent U.S. weapons from facilitating human rights abuses. I mean, yes, but we do that in Ukraine and in the Middle East all the time. So maybe she should look into those things as well. I'm glad she opposes this on principle. She might want to look into a little bit more case study. But she says his invitation should be revoked and it never should have been sent in the first place. Now, this was on the heels of Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, saying that she would boycott the speech and not even attend. Worth noting, she did attend Zelensky's addresses to Congress. So did AOC. I guess that's all nuance.
And she funded the weapons going to Netanyahu. So she's okay, as Thomas Massey called her out on, she's okay to fund and send billions of dollars in weapons to Israel. But she's going to put on a little show and not show up to her boss's speech, Netanyahu's speech.
I'll sign this in private, but I can't look you in the eye. I mean, okay, maybe your conscience is able to compartmentalize, but people are dying. And again, I see both men as similar, Zelensky and Netanyahu, both actively sabotaging peace that would save lives in order to further their political careers and their own agenda, both given the chance to address Congress to make the case for their foreign wars and how American taxpayers should fund them. If either of these two studied the conflicts, meaning AOC or Liz Warren, they would have boycotted Zelensky too, not just Netanyahu. But okay. Now, the White House, this is kind of comical, but not, says they're pretty sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu will not attack President Biden when he comes to Congress this week. Look at this Politico headline. They expect him to play nice. Okay, here's what Jake Sullivan said, White House spokesperson, said, our expectation is that his speech will be one that doesn't look like 2015 when he last addressed Congress. It looks like what it should in the circumstances of today, and that is how the U.S. and Israel are trying together to face down the terrorist threat, to coordinate together on the regional challenges that both of our countries are facing. Okay, is the United States under threat from terrorists, from, Hezbollah? No, Hezbollah exists only to tamp down the Zionist pressure on Arabs in the region. From the Houthis? Well, only because we get ourselves involved. So, okay, but we're pretending that's a threat on us. Interesting. And Sullivan here, the quote says, whether that happens or not, I'll stay tuned. So you don't know exactly what he's going to say to us. You don't know why. We just know that when he says he wants to talk to Congress, he gets to. That's weird, right? Shouldn't we at least have a shared agenda? At least when Zelensky comes, we know he's coming to sell us the war in Ukraine. And we want that, and we want you to want that. Here he's saying, I'll stay tuned, basically clenching his butt cheeks that we don't get embarrassed by this warmonger. Okay, later he says, but we think that he's on board with our peace plan. This quote from Sullivan, we're not going to rest until we have this thing in place, and sooner rather than later. What he's saying is that he wants a ceasefire. The United States wants that, or at least they say they do.
They pretend to.
Netanyahu does not. He does not want that, and
no,
neither
if he gets a ceasefire, he gets thrown out of office. I mean, all you need to do is look at the tens of thousands of Israelis protesting his ouster, and they don't want him in Israel.
Right.
So they do not want him, and the Western media will not show you those videos and those pictures, of course.
Right, but he has signaled for near on 40 years that what he wants is full control of that territory and full control of Gaza, the West Bank, and other Palestinian locations. Netanyahu has repeatedly said that at the very least, Israel will control Gaza, and that they want to decrease the population there from 2 million Arabs to 200,000. In fact, in December, Israeli outlets outright said that Netanyahu, what he wants is to work with the U.S. to lure the Arab population out of Gaza and into refugee settlements in Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, and Turkey. So is this possibly what he's going to make the case to us? Is that, hey, I know you care about civilians, specifically of Arab descent, so let's just put them somewhere. You guys, let's just build them some camps. And then, everybody wins. We get Gaza. They go somewhere else. You feel good about yourselves. That's what he's saying. Last week, Netanyahu actually went to Gaza himself in southern Rafah. Here's some images of that. So does this look like a guy who wants to leave the region, who wants a withdrawal of Israeli troops? Because the U.S. peace plan says that Israel has to leave Gaza altogether. But yet now their leader is visiting this region. It does not look to me like he has any intentions of standing down. So why are U.S. lawmakers welcoming him in when he is sabotaging a peace plan that they say that they want? Clearly, it seems to me they're scared of him and standing up to him, but they want to pretend that they have some control. They don't. Now, House Speaker Johnson assured a Jewish advocacy group over the weekend that he'd keep the natives in check for Netanyahu's visit. Here's what he said to the Republican National Convention, or to the Republican Jewish Coalition. I want you to know there's a number of Democrats in the House who've said they're going to boycott the event, and then there are others who are going to protest. Listen, we're going to have some extra sergeants at arms on the floor, and if anyone gets it out of hand, the Speaker of the House will bang the gavel. We're going to arrest people if we have to do it. We're going to get the message out.
We're going to arrest members of Congress who speak out against a foreign warmonger speaking in front of Congress. I mean, literally. So you could have there's only a handful of members of Congress who aren't paid for by the Jewish lobby in the United States. Just a handful. You can count them on like one hand, really. Like Thomas Massey being one of them. So if he speaks out against it, he could be arrested by the Speaker of the House for speaking out against a foreign leader speaking in front of him.
So what is his option for a peaceful protest, or AOC for that matter? If you support her speaking out against the war in Gaza, what does she do? You don't want her to be arrested. Same with Liz Warren. Yes, I've pointed out that these chicks have a conflict in their conscience, obviously, but they should have a right to protest a foreign leader coming to our country and selling their war. So what can they do then, now that the House Speaker has said, I mean, he has said, look, Israel's our priority, Ukraine is our priority, and we also want the border, but that's not how he acts. So again, this is funny, right? It's funny to have our lawmakers creating these barriers for Israel. So funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious, and it's absolutely hypocritical, and they're lying right to your faces. I mean, they're lying right to your faces. And how much money has Speaker Johnson taken from the Israel lobby? No other country controls the United States more than Israel does. Absolutely the case. And we know that all of these members of Congress have taken huge sums of money from AIPAC and other sources. That is absolutely unequivocal. And we now know that's 100% accurate. So I would love to know how much Speaker Johnson has taken from these guys.
Yeah.
It's deeply disturbing.
And why he's behaving like this.
Nancy Dunks in our chat says, disappointed in the cool tone towards Netanyahu. Most American Jews hold him in high regard, even as the homegrown far left press and politicos go after him. Okay, thank you for that. Cool tone.
Okay, then what have I missed about Netanyahu that makes him a peaceful and a peaceful person who, in fact, has not signaled over and over again that he will take the territory away from Gaza? So tell me where to look for that. I'm happy to.
But even beyond that, forget just a second. Like, why the hell is Zelensky and Netanyahu flying into our United States Congress in a joint session of Congress where they have to go in there in glad hand and stand up and applaud? We had a Ukrainian flag hanging over the lectern that Nancy Pelosi waved and handed out and flown. We had an Israeli flag flying inside the United States Congress. Why is that happening in the United States Congress? I don't know if you know this, but that's it. We are a different country. The United States of America is a different country. I know we pretend to be independent from Israel, but we're really not, and you're seeing it in action in the United States Congress right now. So the cool tone is about our Congress being bought and sold by a foreign government. That's the cool tone that you're hearing from me.
Right, and the special privileges that our lawmakers create in order to, not be able to protest Israel, such as the anti-BDS law that was enacted, that was written, but thankfully never passed. Why are we not allowed to criticize Israel, but we can criticize everybody else? Why are these barriers put up against actual discussion around Netanyahu? Why do we look the other way when one leader clearly allows attacks on civilians? Just why? Right? This is not a pro-Hamas. These are interesting questions.
And the timing is also absolutely suspect, right?
Yeah, and also, why are we, a country in massive debt, giving money to a country that has a surplus? They don't need our money. So it's just like, we're just doing it because what?
Yes. Yeah. Israel has a budget surplus. Yes. We are $35 trillion in debt. They also have a space force. They have a space agency, and we're funneling billions of dollars to them. I mean, we should all demand that doesn't happen. You can love Israel all you want, but we need to take care of ourselves first. The United States is crumbling right now. I think the timing of all of this is fascinating to see President Biden in this whole shift right now. The same week that this is happening, Netanyahu is flying in basically to have meetings.
Right.
Who am I? Who's going to be my benefactors? I got to make sure my members of Congress are all in line, make sure the money's going to still flow to my country.
I mean, when we read about this, when we were first told he would come to Congress, I thought, that's going to be costly to Biden. But now, is there no Biden to pay the consequences for this? Will this actually fall to Kamala Harris? Who knows, right? We can't predict anything at this point.
Well, and I also get frustrated, before we move on, I also get frustrated because you see, like, the Republicans are wearing their U.S. flag and their Israeli flag on their lapels. The Democrats have their flag and the Ukraine flag, and it's like we are the United States. It's like, why are we giving our money that we don't have to all these other countries to fund war? It's like, this whole America first. I mean, how can you like be against that idea of America first? Because we've been putting all these other countries first for so long. We need to put ourselves first, or we're going to crash.
Right. I'll tell you how this movement started during World War II, when the isolationists who did not want to be dragged into a second war after World War I were framed as Nazis, were framed as Hitler supporters, right? And so all along, anyone who's isolationist, I mean, that's not even a word anymore. We don't even use that as a value anymore. Like, let's keep our eyes on our own paper.
Well, and I want to point out too, it's not isolationists, it's non-interventionists. That's what they are. Because isolationism just wants, you don't want to trade or anything with anyone. But like Ron Paul was always accused of being that. But it's more a non-interventionist, like you don't want to intervene in the workings of other countries, but you still want to trade with them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's bring back that as a virtue and see how the media attacks people with that virtue. Anyhow, okay, well, we have more news to get to. Coming up, we're going to talk about the re-election of Ursula von der Leyen. You can see in my voice and my facial expression how I feel about that. I am dispirited. It's a sign that Europe is not a good thing for the people of Europe. I'm not gonna betray my biases right here. Let you know how I feel about that. So in the same week that a court in Europe slaps her hands for the handling of the COVID pandemic, which was a shame, she gets reelected. So are there consequences for globalists, or just no? We're going to talk to Ralph Scholheimer coming up about that. But first,
I know we talk a lot about gold on this show, but silver is also a fantastic investment. It doesn't get the news coverage, of course, that gold does, but many financial experts believe that silver is the best kept secret in investing. It's an industrial metal, so it's in everything from cell phones to batteries, electronics, solar, electric cars, the medical industry. Of course, AI is all the new buzz consuming silver right now. Back in 2020, silver was in a surplus. Solar was a tiny source of demand, and AI was completely non-existent. Now silver is in a total deficit right now. Solar is huge. AI is taking over the world. If the words of our friend Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad, everyone can own and afford some silver. I agree with Robert because it's so cheap comparatively right now. Robert and our friends over at Lear Capital have some great information on silver. So if you're considering silver or you want to learn more about it, all you need to do is call their 800 number. They're an American company. You're not going to get outsourced to some call center in India somewhere. You're going to talk to real American patriots on the phone. Tell them that we sent you. Call their 800 number. Write this down. It's 1-800-613-3557. And they put together a special silver shortage report right now, so you can learn all about it. No obligation to buy anything. But if you decide to invest in some silver, again, I think it's about like $30 right now for an ounce of silver. So compared to gold, which is nearing $3,000 an ounce, it's very affordable. And if it goes back to record highs, about $45 an ounce, that you could do very, very well with that, right? Again, that 800 number is 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. Get that free silver shortage report right now. Remember, there's no obligation to purchase anything. It's just free information so you can learn about precious metals and why we think it's so important to have in your portfolio. Once again, LearRedacted.com.
In the same week that the European Commission had its hand slapped about their COVID policies, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was reelected. Sigh, right? So those of us who watched her COVID policies and her warmongering over the last few years feel maybe dispirited by this. So we asked Ralph Scholheimer, host of the new show Hammer Time on YouTube and one of my favorite European political analysts, to come on the show to, I don't know, Ralph, are we going to commiserate about this? Why is the question. Why her again? Why was she not punished for all of the corruption? And how are Europeans stuck with her?
Well, I think what we see in slightly different tracks, we see a parallel development in the United States and in Europe. But exactly as you pointed out, so you have Ursula von der Leyen, who, apart from the fact that she's more or less on the brink of being a convicted criminal, which should worry everyone, as is, by the way, the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde. So you could, if you want to be facetious, you could say pretty much Europe is now run by criminals, which I guess some of us always had an inkling that they're run by corrupt people, but now it's actual criminals. So that's one point. But the second point is, which I think is almost the more important one, is the people in Europe, the people in the United States, we have been gaslit, we have been betrayed by the media to an extent in quote-unquote free democracies is unimaginable. Right? So you had two cases. One was Ursula von der Leyen, who supposedly, and I cannot stress this enough, is the candidate of the Conservative European People's Party. But if you look how she actually got to the second term, it was with the support of the Greens, because she really was, Europe, black is kind of the color of the conservative parties. So she was black on the outside and green on the inside. Now, I don't know what kind of fruit that would be, but pretty much that is her political agenda. If you look at her career, right, she always endorsed and promoted green policies. There were German journalists who said while she was still active in national politics in Germany, they said they never understood why she's for the CDU, the Conservative Party in Germany, since her policies are all green policies. But the media carried the lie along, right? They said, oh, this is a conservative candidate. This is, a centrist, center-right candidate. It's not. It's a left/far left candidate that now got a second term. And everything you described, from Ukraine policy, from COVID, but of course also insanities like the Green Deal, deindustrialization. These are all things that she endorses. She opened a conference on degrowth just a couple of months back that was promoting basically the deindustrialization of Europe. And the same thing, I would argue, you saw in the United States recently with the cognitive decline of Joe Biden, where we have been told for 3 years, no, he's fine. He's, the sharpest tool in the shed. He's so smart. How did Joe Scarborough say? He's the best Joe Biden there ever was. The amount of lies that the mainstream and legacy media has served the people on both sides of the Atlantic, I think is astounding. And this is why I'm, first of all, grateful for your shout out to my new small podcast, but I have to return the favor. This is why I think Redacted is so important, because they lie to us. And they will do exactly the same thing now that von der Leyen is back in office in Europe, and that now Kamala Harris is going to run for president in the United States.
Right. So can you explain once again, because European politics is a little confusing, how the people of Europe have never voted in Ursula von der Leyen? It's a representative government that votes for her, in the same way now that the Democrats never voted for Kamala Harris, but will be forced to support her. I see those parallels as quite shocking now.
No, you're absolutely right. The degree to which those who are in power are no longer accountable to the people is astounding. Like, for a while they did it in secrecy, right? This was kind of the outsourcing of all kind of obligations to unnamed bureaucracies and kind of taking them away from democratic accountability. But you're right, now it's happening the same in the way in which offices are staffed and with offices are aligned. You're absolutely right. Nobody really wants her in office. Like, just as you said, it's the case in the United States, right? The people feel increasingly that they really no longer have a say in who governs them. And that is correct, right? We talked about this the last time I was on the show. Now you have partially these weird electoral systems that no longer reflect the will of the people. Now you have the bureaucracies that no longer reflect the will of the people. And I truly believe, maybe it takes 5 years, maybe it takes 5 months, but this is how you get into pre-revolutionary territory. Because at some point, if people no longer feel the ability to express their satisfaction or dissatisfaction at the voting booth, or as Joe Biden would say, at the battle box, well, then all you can do ultimately is, of course, a form of uprising. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be, Mad Max on the Champs-Élysées or something, but of course you move closer and closer in this direction, because you have people in power that pursue policies that people don't want. Yet the media tells them, oh, no, you're mistaken. Don't trust. This is basically what they tell us. They say, don't trust your own eyes. And I found this in Europe worrisome, but I think in the United States, we saw it being driven into hypergear the last couple of months. I mean, if you, just as a quick last point, if you look at all the videos, and we talked about this, right, where they claimed, oh, it's cheap fakes, it's out of context, don't take it seriously. They then 3 weeks later used the very same videos to say, look at those videos, he has to go. They, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, they all lied to us. And there is no other way to put this. They lied. By the way, of course, also Kamala Harris lied to us, because she must have known what was going on with Joe Biden. And she pretended that he's fine. And the same is true in Europe, right? When they say, oh, no, don't worry, Miss von der Leyen is a conservative, a center-right candidate. No, she isn't. And this is the worrisome. There are kind of 3 types of parties, I believe, in the United States, but even more so in Europe. There's the far left, and then there's the center left. And then there is the right. And the right is what the media constantly depicts and smears as the far right, but they are not. And this is, I think, the same in the United States with Donald Trump. He is not far right. Le Pen is not far right. These people are, almost ridiculously boring center-right politician. It just seems as far-right because the left has moved so far to the left. These are common sense people. And I think this must be emphasized again and again and again and again, because otherwise we're going to end up with more and more and more further to the left governments. And unfortunately, their agendas are not good for the people. I don't know how else to describe it.
Right. And you know that until recently we lived in Portugal, and I was increasingly afraid to criticize the European government because it became increasingly unsafe to do so in Germany, in the UK, which I know is not part of the EU, but these are far left policies that are terrifying. Now, in Ursula von der Leyen's acceptance speech, she outright said that she would increase military spending. So what the people of Europe get is an unelected leader that they did not vote for, who has tanked their economy, made their living expenses astronomically higher in order to support war in Ukraine first and foremost, but I believe any war would satisfy her appetite. And so they will get more of this. I don't understand how they're not more upset about it, because it will only get worse. So why is she so tone deaf about Europeans' appetite for war? And what can any European do about it, like you said, besides a revolution?
Well, I think there's an explanation for this. I know we kind of dive now a little bit into the psychology of politicians, and that's always a tricky issue. So I try to be as respectful about this as I can. But I think there's a phenomenon, and for me, that's the true phenomenon that distinguishes the right from the left. Is the left has this kind of absurd inverse narcissism where they kind of show their own virtue, how great they are, by supporting anybody and any cause that is not connected to their own people, their own heritage, their own country. Exactly as you said, right? I think we see this when you take the war policy, right? It is very absurd that the same politicians who cannot protect Europe's borders, the same politicians who say we can't do anything about migration, the same politicians that say that sovereignty is a far-right concept, apply all these concepts that they hate when they're applied to the Europeans. They hate, are going to defend them when they apply to Ukraine, right? So when the Germans say protect our borders, limit migration, Germany for the Germans, if you excuse that expression, I'm using it provocative, then that's a far-right, quasi-Nazi fascist thing. But if you say the same thing in the case of Ukraine, right? You know, Ukraine for the Ukrainians, protect Ukrainian sovereignty, protect Ukrainian borders, then it says, of course, that's a sensible position, and we have to defend this as much as we can in every way possible. And the reason for this, I think, is we see this in all other areas as well. I think the same is, by the way, true with environmentalism. I think that there is this concept that the Europeans have to, and the Americans, I think the American left makes the same case. We have to sacrifice ourselves, our own civilization, for somebody else, right? We have to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of immigration, on the altar of endless wars, on the altar of, you name it, of environmentalism, on the altar of transgenderism, because this is how we atone for the sins of the past. This is how we atone for the sins of Western civilization. And most people don't want this because they like Western civilization, right? They like their own heritage, they like their own traditions. But even saying what I just said would make you far-right or neo-Nazi or fascist in 90% of the mainstream media in the United States and Europe, right? And that's the biggest problem. When you say commonsensical things these days, you're still depicted and painted as a far-right individual. So we have to recover, we have to regain the center ground, kind of saying, no, this is not far-right, this is not a radical position, this is a common sense position. Defending your heritage, your civilization, your borders, wanting to control migration, wanting an economy that works for the people and not for somebody else, not for a minority, some interests, offshoring manufacturing abroad. Like, these are common sense politics that everybody would agree with, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And now all of a sudden, all of this is quasi-Hitler. It's very absurd. So I think it's very important, as George Orwell would say, to state the obvious again and again and again and again, because what you said is so important. You're terrified increasingly these days of stating the obvious. It's not that I say, I have such radical views, I cannot say them in public. It's saying the obvious. And this is what's worse. I mean, it reminds me, I don't want to mix up my American president. So I think it was Jefferson. So I plead that I'm an ignorant foreigner here. But it's a famous saying, right? A government that fears its people is a democracy, and the people that fear their government is a tyranny. And I think on a scale, right, we're kind of moving closer to the latter and away from the former. And that is a problem.
Yes, It is a problem. Well, I appreciate your analysis very much, because at least we're on the level, even if we are being fed the same stuff. Something that I was thinking about over the weekend as this Kamala Harris news broke is, okay, I'm going to have to exercise my ability to not buy into the crap about like, oh, yay, it's a woman. These leaders are women. And I recall sometime a decade ago, a 60 Minutes piece that was praising Christine Lagarde because she was a woman. Look at her. She's a leader. She is an economist. And oh, she's a woman. Isn't that wonderful? And now they're going to warm up that crap around Kamala Harris. And it will be a distraction from the fact that these people fund wars, that they lead innocent civilians to their death. And I cannot abide it. And so what can you tell me as I warm up my opposition to this crap gender argument?
Well, no, as a white middle-aged male, who am I to tell you? So
right. I guess what I'm asking you is that you've been fed this about these people, like, oh, but Christine Lagarde, but she's a woman. That's why, we can't go after her because she's a woman. Ursula von der Leyen, yes, but she's a strong woman, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, how have you seen that play out in Europe? Do you think Europeans are now tired of this? We're not going to have this anymore because Christine Lagarde used our money, or not Christine Lagarde, I'm sorry, Ursula von der Leyen used our money for back channel Pfizer deals.
Well, it's true for both of them, right? Again, I think you're too generous here. Also to Christine Lagarde, for example, the ECB did the same thing. They all of a sudden started making claims that it's within the mandate of the European Central Bank to support green policies, which has nothing to do with ECB policies. I would make the one argument, which is that contrary to what the left-leaning media tells you, the Western man or the Western mind is not very sexist. And I think we have the best proof for this. Look at Giorgia Meloni, whatever you think of her policies in Italy. Look at Le Pen in France. People have been voting for a woman if they then feel that the position of the woman in question aligns with their own position. So if you're a patriot, a nationalist, as I consider myself, and the candidate of the Nationalist Patriot Party is a woman, I vote for her just the same as I would if it's a man. I think this is, again, it's an obsession of the left. This is the thing. The left always projects their own obsession, racism, sexism, all things. They project it on others. Most on the right don't care. They like Le Pen, they like Margaret Thatcher, they admired Queen Elizabeth II. They had absolutely no problem with women. They have problem with women who stand against what they believe in, like von der Leyen, like Kamala Harris, like Christine Lagarde. But that's actually an objection based on their positions, not an objection based on their gender. This is, again, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is what the left always does. They force us to play on their terms, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm glad we have this conversation, but then all of a sudden we need to have a conversation about, well, but what about the gender? Isn't that an issue? Shouldn't we talk about this? And yes, we should, and we should talk about it in a way to say it doesn't matter, and for most people on the right, it does matter. Fine. Is there a handful of people out there who might say, I will never vote for a woman? Probably, I don't know, but I don't think that this would be a vote that really matters. What really matters, I think, is, and this is again the kind of where we are fed this kind of myths and this whatever information you want to call it, to use a term that's popular on the left. I mean, look at the biographies of people that run for office these days. Now, say whatever you want about Donald Trump. I have my issues with the man, but generally I support him for a variety of reasons. But this is a man, right, who built up a business, both in real estate and then later on in, as a show businessman, who more or less was successful in everything he undertook, including surviving an assassination attempt and becoming the American president. Yet somehow we are told that this guy cannot be led anywhere near to power, but lifelong bureaucrats who never did anything but, run through the hierarchy of a party, who never created a dime of wealth in their entire life, who never did anything outside either the state or the party bureaucracy, like von der Leyen, like Kamala Harris. They are the ones you want to have in charge. And I find this so absurd. It's a form of decadence that has infected us in the West, right? What kind of we we have our priorities mixed so much upside down that we honestly believe that somebody who never put in an earnest day of work in their entire life is better suited for high office than somebody who actually demonstrated throughout his career that he did something. Again, I said, I have my issues with Donald Trump. There are things that I'm not particularly happy with, but overall, this is an impressive man, and he showed that he is. I really want to make this point again. In the 5-10 minutes and the days after his assassination attempt, this was a man I'm surprised that this was the case. I didn't expect it, but that showed character, right? That showed a certain degree of heroism, I would almost say, that we have not seen, since the sinking of the Titanic. And, what kind of people really put kind of their own selfish behavior behind a greater cause. So I hope that the Americans do see this, because I think he would be a better president. And Europe for the moment is lost. So it's going to be up to you guys to drag yourself and then us with you out of the mud. So November is going to be a faithful election.
That's a lot of pressure. I don't know if you know the Churchill quote that Americans will always do the right thing, but only when they've exhausted all other options. I'm paraphrasing.
And I think that is correct. Yes.
Okay, so I make no promises, but I appreciate that. And I think, I gave you a landmine to step in about gender, and you handled it beautifully. So I appreciate your response very much. So we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Ralph, for your time. Again, check out his new show, Hammer Time, on YouTube, and you can also follow him on Twitter.
Thanks, Natalie.
That's going to do it today for us on Redacted. But you know that we are in a crazy news cycle, so you got to stick with us. You can't go anywhere. We will be here tomorrow, same time. It's 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Hey, check out the newsletter, because the newsletter is a good Cliff's Notes for what we're going to talk about in the show. It's totally free, and we try to link you to all original sources so that you have a place to read and study and think for yourself. It's also maybe a little fun. We got a lot of tidbits in there. It's at redacted.inc. You just go there, put in your email address, and authenticate the email when you get it. And it's totally free. Like I said, there's no upcharge or anything like that. So please do subscribe. It's how we get in touch with you outside of the normal platforms that we are beholden to. So again, it's redacted.inc. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.